Welcome to AcquaTalks Online, created by the Estates at Aquilina, the world's finest residences. This is our forum to talk, connect, share ideas, and cover topics that are important to all of us to ensure we're always learning and growing professionally. I am your host, Alexandra Wensley, Vice President of Communications for the Aquilina brand. I would like to start by sharing with you that we held an intimate ceremony for the topping off of the impressive boutique North Tower of the Estates at Aquilina on Friday, May 7th. The 52-story South Tower has topped out at 672 feet high. For those of you who weren't able to join the live feed, the final beam was hoisted to the top of the building with the American flag and a palm tree. The teams from the Estates at Aquilina and Suffolk Construction proudly cheered on. It was so impressive and a momentous day. I was proud to be part of it. The Estates development is on track for the South Tower completion in the fourth quarter and the boutique North Tower in the first quarter of next year. We're now one step closer to completing the magnificent Estates at Aquilina, where it's all about the living experience. Today on AcquaTalks, we have podcaster Travis Chappell, who will talk about how to shorten the runway to success. He'll focus on how to cultivate authentic relationships that will lead to positive, life-changing results. Travis is the founder and CEO of Guestio, a new software that connects high-level guests with high-level content creators. He's also host of the top-rated show, Build Your Network. In addition to being featured in Entrepreneur Magazine and Yahoo Finance and other notable publications, Travis was named a top 10 podcaster by Forbes.com. Joining us from Las Vegas, Nevada, please help me welcome Travis Chappell.
Hey, Alex, what's up?
Hey, Travis, thanks so much for joining us so early in the morning. What time is it there?
It is 8 a.m. It is 8 a.m. But you know what? A few months ago when we had our daughter, I started getting up at 4 a.m. So 8 a.m. is just like middle of the day, basically. So.
Yes. How old is she?
She's 5 months.
Oh, congratulations.
And my son is 2. So yeah. So
wow, you guys are busy.
Yeah, I had to start getting up early so I could get stuff done. You know what I mean?
I can relate to kids my own, but a lot older, so I could relate. But we're all excited for your talk today. So before you get started, I just want to let everyone know we're recording the talk with Travis. You can find it after on the Estates at Aquilina, Instagram and Facebook channels. Share it with your friends. So you can take notes throughout, but we will have the recording on Instagram and Facebook. And then I'll be joining at the end for the Q&A with Travis, which I think is always the exciting part. So Travis, over to you.
Yes, ma'am. Thanks so much, Alex. I appreciate it. Well, good morning to everybody that is tuning in. Looks like we got Antonia, Betty, Christy, David, Deborah, a few others. Why don't you guys, if you can do me a favor, I think most people here are coming in from Miami, but if you can just get this chat buzzing and see some participation here, would love to hear from you guys on where you're based. Like I said, I think most of you are in Miami, but I'd love to hear where you guys are based. If you drop that into the chat, Marina says Miami. I know there's a bunch of other people, Stephanie Rubin, Robert, Olga, Nate, everybody else. Would love to hear where you guys are tuning in from. And then maybe next time you're in Vegas, you guys can hit me up and we'll go out, grab a coffee, grab a beer, something like that. But cool. Thank you, Marina. Thank you, Stephanie. Shout out. Maria's from Brazil originally. Okay, great. From Brazil, tuning in all the way from Brazil. Oh, that's Marina and Maria. Okay. So Maria's from Brazil. Dudley from Tampa. Cool. I got a bunch of friends out in Tampa. Awesome. Well, I appreciate you guys for jumping in here. We're going to try to move through some real practical stuff. I'm not typically somebody that likes to waste a lot of time. I like to get right into the good stuff, and so that's what I'm going to try to do today. Alex did a fantastic job introducing me, but just a little bit further on that. When I started my show, Build Your Network, so obviously you can tell that show is about relationship building, networking, to a certain extent. And when I started that show, I did it because I wanted to learn about networking the most, because I knew it was a valuable skill and I knew that I wasn't utilizing it. And I knew that if I wanted to achieve the things that I wanted to achieve in my life, that I had to be really careful about curating the people that I was going to be hanging out with and learning from the most. And so I started the show Build Your Network in an effort to try to learn more about how to get myself in front of people and around people who were going to push me to be the version of myself that I wanted to be. The problem was, at the time, I was starting from scratch. I didn't know anybody in any type of business capacity the way I had grown up. And I think Alex and I are going to talk a little bit about this later. Had kind of put me in a little bit of a disadvantaged situation in terms of who I was connected to, what my network was. And so I was literally starting from scratch when I started my show. I was like 23, 24 at the time. And I knew that I wanted to do well, make a lot of money, be successful in business, but I had no idea how to get there, what that even meant really. And I didn't even meet a millionaire in my life, let alone be friends with one or have a mentor or something like that. And I started to realize how insanely valuable this whole networking thing became. And as I grew my podcast audience, what started to happen was people started to know me for being the guy that was able to connect with the highest level people in my space, specifically, which would be, online business, kind of entrepreneurial podcast, YouTube content creation space. And so I was able to connect with some of the top people in my space. I don't know, you guys out in Miami might actually know, if you're in Miami and you're in real estate, you probably know who Grant Cardone is. In fact, if you know who Grant Cardone is, drop like a 10X in the chat or something like that. But these were the type of people that I was able to connect with pretty early on in my journey. And I was able to interview them for my show, get connected with them, get endorsements from them for my sites, from Grant and Elena, and from several other people that were in the same space. And so I started kind of becoming known as the person who the person who was able to connect with all these people, when I really honestly shouldn't have been able to. If you looked at my resume and my background and where I was and things like that, it just didn't add up. And so I started getting all these questions all the time about, hey, Travis, how were you able to connect to that person? How were you able to connect to that person? We've been trying to get that person on our show for 2 years. How did you do it? And so that kind of became the thing I was known for. And so we built out some trainings and started doing, some talks around it. But at the end of the day, that was actually what ended up leading us to create our software platform now, Guestio, because that's ultimately what it does. But I say all that to say that if there's anything that I've tried to study and learn more about, and again, there's probably a lot of other people out there that can teach this better, but I think that we've come up with a pretty good system. We've been able to use it to connect with, literally some of the top billionaires in the world, top content creators and content hosts in the world, people with millions and millions of followers and subscribers and downloads and hundreds of millions in revenue and billions in net worth. And we've been able to use this kind of system. And so today I just want to give you 3 quick things that will help you to be able to start connecting with higher level people more. And I know that everybody on this call is real estate related. You're a broker, you're an agent, and it's your goal to connect with people who have a larger budget for homes and to be able to buy residences at an estate like Aquilina, or to be able to go to, some of the other places that are available. And you need more of those high net worth, high level clients. The problem is, so does everybody else in your industry. And the thing about being in the top 1% is that there's only 1% of people, meaning that it's difficult to connect with those people just because they're simply not in abundance. And so you have to really be strategic about who you're going to connect with and how you're going to do it, or else it's not going to happen. And so let's go ahead and dive into these 3 things. And if you got any questions, by the way, I'd love to hear them. I think Alex is going to go through, do some Q&A with me at the end. And so if you guys have any questions for me on any of this, please drop it in the chat. Stay engaged in the chat, guys. I'd love to hear from you a little bit more. I know everybody's probably got some work going on and doing some things, but would love to hear from you guys a little bit if that's cool. So let's go ahead and dive in. Very first thing, number 1, to develop high-level relationships. Number 1 is be intentional. Be intentional. You'd be surprised how many people I have conversations with that all claim that they want to have a better network, that they want to build their network with high-level people, that they want to connect with this person and that person. And then when I ask them, well, hey, have you ever sat down and made a list, like at least 100 people? 100 people. Have you ever sat down and made a hard list of actual names of people that you want to connect with? And more often than not, the answer is no. And it always kind of puzzles me because we all know how important this is, right? Like if you could on demand connect with the high level people that you want to connect with, that are your ideal clients for your business, if you could do that on demand, how many of you think that would be a useful skill? Type a yes in the chat or something like that. Okay, give me a yes, give me something. Let me know that I'm resonating with you here, because this is how important this stuff is. If you can learn how to connect with the best people, your ideal clients, even if you don't get business from them on day one, how valuable would it be to become the go-to person in that entire circle of all of the people that you want to connect with the most? How valuable would that be? And so if you're going to get there, you have to be intentional about it. And so I sat down and I wrote out a list. Now, for me, my list was who I wanted to bring on my podcast. Your list might look something different. But for me, it was who do I want to bring my podcast? And I wrote out a list. And then what I did is I actually segmented that list. Now, this is why I say it's intentional. I segmented that list into groups of people who I thought would probably know each other, do business with each other, like each other, trust each other in some sort of capacity. Okay, because what ended up happening is if you can infiltrate a circle of people where all of the people in that circle know each other, it'll be significantly easier to be able to build relationships at a higher accelerated rate in terms of your time than it will be if you go build a relationship with this person and then you got to go over here to this person and you got to go to here to this person, and these three people don't know each other and have nothing to do with each other. Okay. So I started connecting with these groups of people. So I connect with the first person. It was a lot easier to go get the second person because the second person knew the first person. And then the third person knew the first and the second person. And then the fourth person knew all the first three people. Right. And so when that started to happen, it started building up this snowball to where it's like, man, if I have 15 people in this circle, then like everybody starts to know me too. And then I become the go-to whatever guy. For me, it's podcasting because I teach podcasting for a living. I teach entrepreneurs how to build profitable and network expanding podcasts. That's what I do. And so when I get in these circles and then any of those people have podcasting needs, guess who they're calling? Me, right? Because I built those relationships with those people and infiltrated that circle. And then I have another group of people, and these people don't really know these people, but I know all 12 of these people. I know all 12 of these people. Now, the cool thing happens when you're intentional about doing it this way, when you can connect those groups of people together and they're all high level, but they just don't know each other, then you just became the connector in that circle of people, which is an insanely valuable piece of the puzzle to fill in other people's networks, because it's not just you guys that wants to build a valuable network. It's not just me that want to build a valuable network. Anybody that is a high level individual is consciously thinking about the value of the relationships that they keep and hold in their lives. Okay. So this becomes a tool that you can now leverage to be able to continue to connect and build your network with the people that you want to be connecting with. Okay. So number one is be intentional. Write a physical, literal list. Okay. And if you want, by the way, in my software, it's totally free. Okay. I'm not trying to sell you guys anything. In Guestio, you can build a list of people. It's called your smart list in the back end of Guestio, totally free. And you can type in the domain name of the website that they're associated with, and Guestio will scrape that domain and give you the email to reach out to the person you want to reach out to, so that you can actually have a way to connect with them. So that's why we call it a smart list. So you can use that, or you can just use Evernote or Notes or a freaking notepad and a pen. However you do it, I don't care how. Write the list. Be intentional. Okay. Number two is be valuable. Be valuable. Okay. This is the crux of networking in general, of building relationships in general. A lot of people equate networking to like the 1980s style name tag, cocktail mixer, 1,000 business cards in your face type of a networking type mixer event or whatever. That's what people equate networking to. In my mind, networking is simply intentional relationship building. It's still relationship building. It's the same thing. It's just that you're doing it intentionally with people who probably have more common interests, right? Like that's, to me, is the definition of networking. Is like, if I'm out at a bar and I run into some random person, the odds of that person and me being on the same page in life in terms of what our goals are and what industry we're in and stuff like that is pretty low. Right. But if I go to an event that's full of, let's say, podcasters, then I know that I have something in common with every single person at that event. Okay. It doesn't mean that I'm going to try to go throw a business card in their face and ask for business right now, because that's not how relationships work. Right. Relationships take time. That's like trying to marry somebody on your first date. Right? It's not how it works. Like, it takes time to build the know, like, and trust that a relationship has in order to be able to do business with some of those people. Okay. But if you can become a more valuable person, you can start to shorten that runway a little bit. So I always tell people this, and write this down if you're taking notes. Okay. Your network will always increase in direct proportion to the amount of value that you can add to other people. Your network will always increase in direct proportion to the amount of value that you can add to other people. And I'll tell you a quick story on why on how important I think this is. This was at the very beginning of my podcasting online business journey. And I was trying to connect with this guy. His name was John Lee Dumas. He has a big time podcast called Entrepreneur on Fire. One of the top shows in iTunes at the time, and it really still is. But he's got close to 100 million total downloads and just was a rock star in the space that I wanted to get to know. And so I wanted to get to know this guy. And I saw that he was putting on a mastermind at his house, like a 3-day event at his house down in Puerto Rico, where he was going to teach podcasting and do a workshop and all this other stuff. And I was like, cool, I'm down. So I paid this money to go down to his house. There was only 5 or 6 of us that were going to go. It was $8,000 for the weekend. Okay. Because sometimes you got to pay to play. Yeah, just to be honest with you, sometimes you're just going to have to pay to play, because that's a way to add value to somebody, right? If you can put money into the pocket of somebody who understands the value of making money, then a lot of times that's a really quick value add, and you didn't have to do much work to do it. So that was the first thing, is I paid to go to his house in Puerto Rico. But then immediately after I did that, my second question was, how do I continue to add value while I'm down there? How do I be different from the other people that are going to be there? How do I go to this event without thinking about the things that I'm going to get in return, and more thinking about how I can continue to add value into this relationship with this particular person? And I, at the time, didn't have much to offer. Like, this dude had everything better than I did. He had more connections. He had more money. He had more knowledge. He had more industry expertise. Like, he had everything more. I didn't have anything at the time to be able to offer. And so I was like, this is going to be a difficult way to add value. And so I looked back in my past, and in college, I'd done like wedding photography, portrait photography, and stuff like that to make extra money. And so I was like, oh, I can take pictures. He has a beautiful home with an infinity pool overlooking the ocean in Puerto Rico. And so I was like, man, if I can just like be there, take some awesome pictures for them, take some good video footage, I'll be able to give this to them that they can use to market future events. Like, this will be a big value add. I even went as far to buy a drone. Okay. I never flown a drone in my life. I didn't really know anything about them. All I knew is that I was trying to add value to this guy, and I wanted to figure out how I could do that. So I went and I bought this drone. It was like $1,200. So I go down to Puerto Rico. The first night I was like, I should probably get some practice with this thing, because I'd only thrown it up one time before I left for Puerto Rico. So the first night I get it up, and it was perfect time to be practicing, because it was like the Puerto Rican sunset and ocean was right there, and I was getting some amazing footage. And I brought it down to land it. And the thing that I had underestimated was how difficult it was to land a drone, especially because I was flying it from the rooftop of the condo that we're staying on. So the square footage of the space that I was trying to land the drone in was really limited. And I thought that it was a much more automated landing process than it was. It turned out to be a lot more manual than I had previously thought. And when I was bringing the drone down, it caught a plant in the corner of the rooftop, and the propeller caught the plant, and then it took the drone and smashed it into the wall. 2 of the propellers broke. It only came with 1 replacement propeller. So now the $1,200 investment that I had made to add value while I was down in Puerto Rico with this guy was gone. It was out the window. And I was back to square one. And I really didn't know exactly how I was going to make it happen, but I kept my eyes open for the rest of the weekend. And eventually, basically what ended up happening is he was going to be speaking at this event coming up, this big podcast event, and he was a keynote speaker at that. And he had a booth set up to be able to sell these journals that he had created. And so he asked me to stop by his booth for 10 minutes to train this like intern that was volunteering to work the booth for them. Just like, hey, can you give him some closing lines? You know, they found out that I had a past in door-to-door sales and retail sales, and that I had sold at a bunch of home shows and trade shows and different things like that. And so he's like, can you stop by, give him like 10, 15 minutes of just some advice to help him sell more journals? And I was like, bro, I'll work the booth for you. So I volunteered 3 days of my time and my sales expertise to work this booth absolutely for free. I didn't get paid commissions. I didn't get paid to be there. I still paid for my own way to the event. I paid for my own hotel room. All I wanted to do was add value into a relationship where I would be able to learn from somebody who'd been there, done that, walked the road before me. And, now here we are a few years later. I've, become one of his referral partners. He sends me business every once in a while. And he is actually an investor and advisor and partner in my new software company that largely is built around the podcasting industry, which he's insanely well connected and powerful in. And so that one thing that I did 4 or 5 years ago, however long ago it was now, to add value to him was the thing that helped me get to where I am now. Now, the reason I tell you this story is because I want you to understand that adding value is going to look different across the board depending on the person you're connecting with and the person that you are. And the reason that I started that off by saying you are the value that you can create, right? Your network will grow in direct proportion to the amount of value that you can add to other people, is that now it's way easier for me to add a similar or disproportionately higher amount of value to somebody because I've worked on myself for the past 4 or 5 years. Now I have an audience of people that listen to my podcast. I have an email list of customers and stuff like that. I have influence and connections in different spaces that other people don't have influence and connections in. Like I've worked hard to make myself a more valuable person over the last few years so that I can add value to somebody like that without having to volunteer 3 full days of my time after paying them $8,000 for their advice, right? Like that was just the only way at the time that I could add value because I didn't have anything else to offer. But now that I've kind of worked on all these other pieces of my brand and of my business, it's a lot easier for me to get in and add value in those situations. So be valuable, be intentional, be valuable. And last thing I'm going to say is be an asset. Be an asset. So what do I mean by this? There's a kind of a phrase that I don't know if I coined it, but something that I really try to push and popularize, and that's called content networking. And so content networking is kind of similar to what we're doing right now, right? There's 24, 25 people on this call. So everybody on this call, I don't think anybody here knew who I was before tuning in to this call. This is an example of content networking. You guys had no idea who Travis Chappell was until I hopped on and provided some content. And if that content is perceived as valuable in your mind, then that gives you a reason to connect with me further and potentially do business with me in the future. And so by far, the number one thing, because now I've done 600 episodes of my podcast, Build Your Network. We've talked to hundreds of some of the world's most successful entrepreneurs in the space. And I get this question like, hey, Travis, what's the common denominator? Or like, what's been the biggest thing that's helped you build your network? And every time my answer, as practical as I can be, right? No motivational woo-woo kind of stuff. Like this is insanely practical advice. The number one thing was starting my podcast. A podcast was my perfect foot in the door to build relationships with people who would normally not give me the time of day. In fact, I literally had people tell me this. I literally had people tell me no to a 3-minute free phone call. I was like, hey, I have one quick question for you, one piece of advice I want to ask you. Can you spare 3 minutes? And they said no. And then I mentioned something about my podcast in my reply to them, and they said that they would come on my podcast. So I was like, wait. So you're going to say no to a 3-minute phone call that nobody even has to know about, but you're going to say yes to a 35-minute podcast interview where I can ask you as many questions as I want to ask you, and I get to share the episode to my audience for them to learn from, and for me to share credibility on the stage with you, who's already really well known. Like my mind was blown in that situation, and I took it and ran with it. And so the number one thing that I've ever done for my network is building my podcast. And I have friends that, and this is why I say content networking, not necessarily just podcast networking, because I have some friends who've done this very similar thing by building a live event. And bringing out some of the best speakers. Like if some of you who knew who Grant Cardone was, I'll use him as an example. He's great content networker. He's built his network full of these literal A-list celebrities and people that can help push his brand forward and do big deals with him. He has connected with all those people because he built an insanely successful live event where he sold out the Marlins Stadium and had 30,000 people in attendance. When you have that kind of an audience, you can get the best people in the world to speak at it because you built an asset. This is why I say be an asset. And I mainly mean build an asset, like not just you being an asset, but you need to be a host of something. You need your own platform, a podcast, a YouTube channel, a live event, a meetup, a blog, some form of content platform where you can wield an audience of people, where you can wield attention, and then you become the person that other people want to connect with and not just the other way around. That's where it gets really powerful, guys, is when you're not the only person that's reaching out to other people, but other people are starting to reach out to you because you've built something that's extremely, extremely valuable. And so if I could leave you with anything today, if you're just tuning in and you want to take away one thing, start a podcast. I promise you'll be surprised at the people who will say yes to a podcast interview. And this is why I like podcast interviews as the thing, right? So when you go make your list of people, it's so much easier to get your foot in the door with these people if all you're asking for is 30 minutes of their time on a podcast interview because you just respect what they've built so much. That's a way easier ask than like, can I take you out for a cup of coffee? Or, can I get some advice from you? Or can I pick your brain? Yeah, that sounds fun. Let me pick your brain. You know what I mean? Like people are going, like, again, you'll be surprised at the quality of people and the type of people who will say yes to a podcast interview when they'll say no to just about any other form of initial point of contact ask. The podcast interview is just the best way that I've seen to be able to get your foot in the door. And that's why I like it better than live events and other forms of content, because you can do a podcast interview like this. This is my studio, guys. I'm in my home office right now. This is my studio. This is where I've interviewed some of the best people in the world. And this is how we continue to build a connection. And then one thing that I do to continue to cultivate those connections is literally tomorrow night, I'm hosting a dinner with about 30 people that have all been past guests on my show, Build Your Network, including the former CEO of Chappell, the CEO of Hint Water, which is a multi-9-figure company. We have some New York Times bestselling authors that are coming in, and we're bringing all those people together in one room for one dinner. All the cost is on me. But the thing is, and I don't even have a way to make money off of it right now. This is a loss for me. I'm putting on this dinner at a loss, but I know the value of relationships and I know the value of connecting with these types of people in person. So I got my foot in the door by interviewing them with my podcast. And now I'm doing number 2, which is the value add, right? I'm being valuable to those people. I'm creating opportunity for them to connect with other high-level people that they may not have known if it weren't for me putting this dinner together and putting them together in a room. So that's it, guys. Be intentional, be valuable, and be an asset. Okay. If you do those 3 things, I would love to hear from some of you guys, how it benefits you, how it benefits your business. If you fast forward the clock in 5 years and you've interviewed 300 of the top people that are on your list, if you've interviewed those people and you've gotten 0 business from it, I would be insanely surprised. Okay. Like I'm saying, this should not replace your normal lead gen activities, right? Like those lead gen activities are lead gen activities. They're there to provide sales for your business and give you life and oxygen in your business. But if you're not constantly building this bank of relationships before you're thirsty, right? You got to build the well before you're thirsty. If you're not constantly doing that, you're going to be left behind by somebody who is doing it. And so be the person that's doing it. Don't be the person that's not doing it. I've taken enough time of your guys' time today so far. So Alex, I'll go ahead and let you come back in and wrap it up, do some Q&A, and we'll have some fun.
Travis, that was great. It was so engaging, and throughout it, I was smiling and laughing. And your 3 things are just, they're so valuable. Be intentional, be valuable. took my notes, and be an asset. So thank you. So it's all about creating these high-level relationships. And our topic today was how to shorten the runway to success. So how do you define success?
Yeah, I define success as self-awareness applied is my definition of success, because I don't think that my definition of success for me should be everybody else's definition of success. So my definition of success is you better get to know yourself really well, and you better have some self-awareness to understand what you want out of life. And then ask yourself what kind of work needs to be done to be able to get to what you want out of life, and if it's worth it to you. And if it's not worth it to you, then you might want to adjust your goals a little bit and focus a little bit, maybe lower the bar or raise the bar, just adjust depending on the amount of effort that you want to live and the type of life that you want to live. We only get one shot at it. So you better be super intentional, really clear about where you want to end up, because you're not going to get there on accident. You know what I mean? That'd be like taking off from New York in a boat and hoping you end up in London when you didn't chart the course or set a direction for your path at all. You know what I mean? Like, hopefully you'll find land at some point, but if you do, it'll probably going to be like somewhere in Africa or something like that. You know what I mean? The odds of you actually making it to Southampton, England, is going to be extremely low, because you have no idea where you're going or where you're headed or what the destination is going to be. So you got to set the destination first and have clarity on how you're going to get to that destination. And that, to me, is success, is having the self-awareness to understand what you want out of life and going and getting that.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah. Thank you. So I find your background so fascinating. I've done a little research, and I read that you spoke to over 2,000 people at the age of 15. So tell us more about your childhood, because you were talking about like you were a salesperson, but go even, when you were younger, and tell
Sure.
everyone how you started out. I find it so fascinating.
Sure. So I grew up in I don't call it a cult, because I just can't bring myself to. I don't think it truly is one, but a bubble for sure. A religious bubble community down in Southern California. And so to give you guys an idea, I went to kindergarten all the way through senior year of college on the same campus. So not the same city or zip code, like the same exact 20, 40 acre campus. They had a K through 12 school and a college and the church all in one, like literally the people around that place in that city, they call it the compound, because it's its own little compound. It's like a mini city by itself. And so that's where I grew up. I grew up on that campus, started going to church there when I was 3, enrolled in kindergarten when I was 5, and graduated college at 22 or 21. And that's where I lived basically my entire life. And so when I said earlier that I was starting my network from scratch, it was that when I left that kind of world behind me and was pursuing a path that was different from the path that other people wanted me to pursue, I genuinely was starting over. You know what I mean? There was a lot of people. It was kind of put into 3 groups of people who like definitely wanted to see me fail because they didn't want to see a success story come out of somebody who left their world. There were people who, and I would say that was probably a smaller percentage of people. Probably the bulk of the people just didn't care. The bulk of the people were just neutral. They were just kind of like, okay, well, if you're not doing the thing that we want you to do, then like, good luck, but we're not helping you. You know what I mean? And then the third group of people would be like my very close friends that were still wanting to see me succeed, but that was also a really small group of people. And so when I left that world, I was legit starting from scratch in terms of my network. I didn't know anybody, like everybody in my entire life. I grew up, my whole life was there, all my extracurriculars, my sports, my activities, like everything was there. So when I left that, it was square one, which is why that networking relationship building piece became so apparent to me. So when I graduated college, I had my degree in Bible and church ministries. I double majored in Bible and church ministries. And I figured out I didn't want to be in ministry, and you can't really use that degree for anything else, especially because it was an unaccredited degree in Bible and church ministries, which is even more worthless than a accredited degree in Bible and church ministries. So when I left, I did the only thing I knew how to do, which was door-to-door sales. And I had done a bunch of that in college. And so I just went directly into door-to-door because it was the only thing I knew knew how to do. I figured that would be a better way to do it because I could potentially make six figures instead of, going and taking some entry-level job at some random place for $35,000 a year or something like that. I was like, I'll just go do this 100% commission door-to-door thing because there's more opportunity there. So, made six figures doing that the first year that I did it full time, and looked into the future. Didn't like what I saw. Didn't like that. I didn't want to continue to be knocking on doors when I was in my 30s, 40s, 50s. And I had friends who were still doing that, and not to knock on that industry at all, pun intended. But it just wasn't for me. And so that's when I started listening to a bunch of podcasts, reading books, getting into personal development, and then eventually ended up starting my own podcast and kind of the rest was there.
What a story. And so I guess on the compound is where you spoke to groups of people and
yeah. So that was a huge positive takeaway. There's pros and cons, I think, to the way everybody was raised and the way everybody grew up. And that was certainly one of the pros was that, instead of messing around in my teenage years and getting in trouble, I was, doing stuff like going to preaching camp in the summertime, which was literally just a college level homiletics class that they would teach in 1 week. So you literally just go to class all day. And then at the end of it, you preach to a group of people. And then we'd have preaching contests every year and like our fine arts competitions, which is a collection of like 100 of the same schools that had beliefs similar to ours. And we would host this big fine arts competition, and they had preaching contests there and like duet acting speeches and all these other different speeches and opportunities to get up in front of people and talk. And so like my senior year, I was Ebenezer Scrooge in A Christmas Carol. And, there was probably 1,500 people that came through that weekend to watch it. And when I was 15, that was when I preached in front of our whole church on a Wednesday night. We had services 3 times a week, Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night.
Wow.
And so Wednesday night crowd was more of like the church membership, not like new people. And so, there's 7,000 people on a Sunday that come through that church, but probably on Wednesday night would be like 1,500 to 2,000 people or so. And that was when I spoke at 15 years old and to that, type of an audience and stuff.
Well, yeah, you look back, I mean, you're a great speaker. So yeah. So.
I appreciate that. Yeah. So I had a lot of experience doing stuff like that through the way that I grew up, for sure.
Okay. So now the pandemic, it's been so hard on all of us. So how did you get through it last year?
That's a good question. Focusing on my physical and mental health more probably was a big deal to me. Physical health for sure was something that just kind of rose to the forefront. It was one of those, the thing that I love about physical health piece. And I told you earlier, I get up at 4 a.m. The reason that I do that is that I have a bunch of stuff to get done during the day. I still have to be a dad and a husband. And so the only way that I can get gym time in is if I get up at 4. And so by doing that, I make sure I prioritize my health. But the thing that I love about your health is that it's 100% within your control in business. And sometimes there's things that happen that are completely out of our control, that you can put in a bunch of the work and then lose the deal to somebody else, or some external circumstance affects the way the deal works out. And that's exactly what happened with COVID, something that was completely out of our control that probably a lot of people on this call suffered from tremendously, especially in the real estate space at first. And so health is one of those things that it's 100% within my control. I can control the fact that like, man, I'm just going to get up, I'm going to go work out, get a good workout in. It just helps, I think, with my mental health, and exercise in general helps with your mental health. Just from a, cortisol level standpoint, and releases, stress that's in your body and different things like that. So focusing on my physical health, I think, was really good. And then the mental health piece as well. So I just started to do a little bit more challenging things and started to work on myself a little bit more intentionally than I had been. And out of all that is kind of where my software company came from. We started building the software in like June of 2020. And so that, I don't think that would have happened if something like COVID didn't force me to kind of look at, take stock of the way that I was spending my time and what my future looked like. And so, for me, it was focusing a lot of my physical health and focusing on being present with my family when I had the time. And then sometimes I go through phases in what I'm doing in terms of reading and stuff. And so during that time, there's probably 3 or 4 books in a row that I read on more like mental health, happiness, philosophy, stoicism, different things like that I knew were probably going to be pretty helpful during a crazy, worldwide crisis.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it was a really tough year. It's still tough, but yeah, there's so many positive things. We're very lucky in the luxury real estate market. Miami is on fire. It is very, very
Oh
hot.
yeah, it ended up being okay for real estate
Yeah,
agents. Yeah, but that
yeah,
first like 30, 60 days was
yeah, which is so
scary
scary. Yeah,
time.
agreed. So you mentioned on the talk, and when we talk separately, you're a big proponent of having your own podcast. So you mentioned you've done 600. Wow, that is so, so impressive. You also told us you're going to be having this dinner soon with 30 people who have been on your show. So tell us, who are some of your favorite people that you've interviewed? We know
Ah,
Grant, and we
that's a
all know Grant well. So
yeah, that's a tough one because it's like picking between your kids. There's just so many that are good. Yeah, I mean, Grant was a good. We've got a lot of great feedback on that interview. Actually, like I had a lot of people. Actually, somebody hit me up like yesterday, and this is an interview we did two plus years ago, maybe even 3 years ago now. You can look it up if you just Google Grant Cardone, Travis Chappell, it'll come up on Grant's YouTube, probably before it comes up on mine because he has more search results than I do, obviously. But we got a lot of great feedback on that one in particular because we had a lot of people tell us that, oh, I didn't like Grant before, but then I watched your interview with him and it like showed me a different side of him and stuff. So definitely check that one out. But probably a couple of my other favorite ones, Molly Bloom was one of my favorites, and she's just a total sweetheart, and she's become a really good friend of mine now, which makes it even better. And if you guys haven't watched the movie Molly's Game, especially if you guys like business, you should definitely check out Molly's Game. It's a movie made about Molly's life. Jessica Chastain plays her, Kevin Costner plays her dad, Idris Elba plays her lawyer, but basically she runs an underground poker game, and it becomes one of the most exclusive poker games in the world. And they have these billionaire hedge fund managers and A-list celebrities, athletes that are playing in her poker games. And she's like 32, 33 years old at the time, running these poker games with a minimum buy-in of $250,000. And people buying in all the time and losing 10, 20, $30 million in a night. And just crazy stuff. And then mafia gets involved. The FBI comes knocking on her door. She ends up like getting all of her assets seized. She ends up getting beat to a pulp by the mafia. Like just a crazy story that she had. And so I watched her movie, which is, like I said, just a really great movie in general, regardless of what you want to, do with it. But so after I watched the movie, I was like, I got to get in touch with this girl. And so I got her on the show, and she was probably one of my favorites just because I really loved her story a lot. Tom Bilyeu was a big one for me. I really respect the hell out of Tom Bilyeu and him and his wife Lisa, and the way that they've built their life and their family, their relationship. They just, he exited Quest Nutrition. It was the number 2 fastest growing company on the Inc. 500 list. And then he exited it after it hit $1 billion and started this content creation company called Impact Theory. And they have a bunch of different shows now. They reach millions of people on a daily basis. And he was somebody that I really wanted to connect with because he had just multiple pieces of his life that I was really interested in. He's a really healthy guy. He does a show on his relationship with his wife and how important that is to him. And yet he's still this crazy driven business builder and entrepreneur. And so I really like that one too. So there's 3. I'll give you 3.
Yeah. Okay. I'm going to watch the movie.
It's definitely worth it. Yeah. The movie's great.
That's good. I don't know if anyone else who's watching has watched it, but I will. So this question came in. So can you recommend any great business books?
Oh, I mean, where do I start? If I'm gonna break it down for just like generic money mindset, I would start with something like Secrets of the Millionaire Mind by T. Harv Eker. I think that's a really great book. It just helped me rewire the way that I looked at money. And money is interesting. If you have a bad relationship with money, then money's going to have a bad relationship with you. But if you have a good relationship with money, you'll find that it's just easier to bring it in. It's easier to keep it. It's easier to grow it. It's easier to earn it. If you just have a better relationship with money and view money in a different way, then, we all have limiting beliefs around money that we were raised with, unless you were one of the very, very few fortunate ones to be raised in a household of people who looked at money in a really healthy way. But most people have a really negative viewpoint in money in some regard. hard, and you might not even know what it is. But if you read a book like that, it kind of helps you work through some of those things. So that was a really good one. In terms of like tactical, practical, The Lean Startup is a really great one by Eric Ries. I put off reading it for probably like 3 years because it seemed to be more of like a Silicon Valley startup type of a lean startup book. When I read it, it's definitely still kind of like the examples they used are still in that industry, but man, I wish I would have read it when I started because it's still extremely valuable for where you are, no matter where you are in the journey or what industry you're in, what business you're in. The concepts, the core concepts in that book are, I think, really valuable.
Okay. And this question came in from our friend, Elliot Lee. He said, Travis, who was the first high net worth person you connected with? And was it the gentleman you met in PR?
Yeah, I think it was actually, I think it probably was him. Was the first person that I actually really connected with in person was probably John Lee Dumas, and paid to play for that one, man. And, I paid to get in front of him and go to his house and hang out with him for a couple of days.
Was that the one in Puerto Rico? No.
Yep.
Oh,
yep.
Okay.
Yeah. So that probably was the first real high net worth, highly influential type person that I ever connected with.
That was a great story because you were saying it was 5 to 6 years ago, right?
Yeah, it was something like that. 26.
Yeah, that was when drones. We didn't really know that much, right, about drones back then.
Yeah, they were pretty new. They were pretty new at the time.
Yeah. That's pretty cutting edge. But I can't believe it broke. What a story! But then the positives come out. I love that. So you've said that invest in yourself before you invest in anyone else, and many people say this. Can you elaborate a little bit more on that?
Yeah. So, for me, I make it just a kind of cornerstone of my life to continue to invest in myself. And one of the reasons I do that is kind of what I already talked about in my talk, which was the being valuable piece. The more I continue to invest in myself, invest whatever resources that I have, right? Not just money. It would also be time. It would also be energy. It would also be in difficult tasks, right? Like getting up early or whatever would be challenging for you. The more you continue to invest in yourself, the more you become a valuable person, which makes you a more valuable person to connect with, which exponentially increases the amount of people that you can hang out with or hold conversations with or connect with or build relationships with. And so investing in yourself, I think, is kind of the name of the game. And especially if you're not to a certain point yet, if you don't have at least $100,000-$200,000 in net worth or in your bank account or whatever, then I think the majority of the excess capital that you have after paying your bills should go into investing into you. Because a lot of times people want to know should I invest in crypto? Should I invest in real estate? Should I invest in stocks and bonds or whatever? And a lot of times the answer is, if you still have to ask that question, you should probably learn more about all of those things and learn more about which one you want to invest in the most and get to know one asset class really well and invest in that hardcore because that's what you know the most. And then take that capital and start diversifying it across other different, types of asset classes. But I think people try to skip this investing in yourself part, and that's when you have that's when you have the person that invests in the stock market right now because everything's going well, but then in a year and a half after inflation catches up and they hike up interest rates and we have a little bit of a correction or a recession or whatever is going to come next, something's got to happen or else inflation is going to be way too high. No matter what the Fed says, right? So something's got to happen at some point. There's going to be a correction. There's going to be a recession. Those are the people that are going to sell off everything 30 days into the recession when the stock market's down 25, 30%, and then wonder why it didn't work. And it's like, well, you just didn't educate yourself and to have the confidence to stay in the game, to stay in the markets until they recover, because they're always going to. It's always going to be worth more in the future than it's going to be worth now. If you're, in an index fund or something like that, obviously, if you put all your eggs into one basket, that company in particular could fail. But if you have it across multiple assets or multiple companies in a single portfolio, then that's ultimately going to be up in the future. Nobody told you to not sell. Like, hey, don't sell. The only thing that locks in your losses is when you sell and get out of the markets. Like, stay in it and be in it for the next 10, 15 years. When you're putting money in here, don't wait for it to go up in a year from now and take it out. If you put money, keep it there for 15 years. But like, you wouldn't know that if you didn't take the time to invest back into yourself, whether it's time, like I said, time, money, energy, knowledge, whatever it is, invest into yourself, because you are your number one asset. Always and forever. You will always be your number one asset. You could lose everything tomorrow, but you'll still have the knowledge that you have and the relationships that you've built. Like, that's why it's so important to continue investing in yourself, because you're the only thing that really makes you recession proof. You know, recession can take away a lot of physical assets. A lot of people got hit hard in the last recession, especially with real estate, obviously. And, but a lot of those people that I know that got hit hard in that recession that had built up a crazy good portfolio, a lot of them have recovered and built up something even better, because the ultimate thing that they built up during that time that they were building their assets was their mind, was their knowledge, was their insights, was their wisdom, was their relationship capital. They were building up in themselves, and that's how they were able to go get that back, and even better the second time. So investing in yourself is the game.
Yeah, keep learning. And I think everybody who's listening and who follows us on AcquaTalks every month, they're trying to educate themselves and learn from people like you. So I definitely agree. And I love what you said, like your first point, be intentional. That's what it's all about. Like exactly what you're saying, getting into the stock market. I'm thinking, I've been dabbling in it too, but like, do your research, put a list together. Yeah. What industries? I think that all makes sense. And this last question before we're going to wrap this up, what's the number one way that the real estate community, people who are listening right now will be watching later on, our Instagram and the recording, that they can make a substantial difference? What do you think in the real estate market? What can they do? What can, of these 3 points, what do you think is the most important?
I mean, I'm going to harp on this because I just believe in it. You gotta differentiate yourself by building an asset and being a host of something. Like, especially with high net worth, high level people, like, you need to be able to bring something else to the table. Expertise in your market, that's a given, right? Like, every single person on this call needs that. If you don't have expertise in your market, forget about trying to connect with high net worth people and delivering them, or representing them on the buy side or the sell side. You know what I mean? Like, that's like the starting point. Everybody should have that. But from that point, what are you going to do to get that person to use you instead of the other 50 people that they could use that have just as much knowledge on the market as you have? What's going to be the differentiation point? And to me, that's the whole thing about having an asset, building a platform, having a meetup, having a live event, having a large social media following on TikTok, on YouTube, on a podcast. Like, there's something there that differentiates you and allows you to bring an additional piece of value in addition to the knowledge that you have about the real estate market that you operate in.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Like, there's something that you're bringing to the table. There's an angle that you're approaching your clients from that other people just can't compete with, because you have this other piece. And if you look at some of the most successful real estate agents out there, most of them are doing this. The Josh Altmans of the world and the Ryan Serhants of the world, the people that are selling these insane luxury properties. I think Ryan Serhants was like the second largest transaction in US history or something, like $140 million home that he sold in Florida a couple months back or something like that. And like, the reason that he's done that isn't because he just knows the market that much better. In fact, he self-admittedly like crash coursed the Miami market in like 3 hours before he showed his buyer this house. You know what I mean? Like, the reason that he landed that client wasn't because of his insane expertise in Miami. He's a New York real estate agent. He didn't even know the market. He doesn't know the market half as well as all the people that are watching this call right now. That's not the differentiation point. The differentiation point is that he's Ryan Serhant, and he's a New York Times bestselling author, and he's on Bravo, and he's on these other reality TV shows. And a lot of people know who he is and like him. They trust him, right? That's the angle. That's the thing that allowed him to be able to jump in on some of those deals. So I'm just a really big proponent of, you got to have a differentiation point, build an asset, build something that you can own, something that differentiates you and makes other people want to do business with you rather than you always having to go chase other people.
Yeah. I like what you mentioned, this dinner that you're going to do. You have to let me know about it. It sounds great to bring all these like like-minded people people together. You're hosting it, but they all want to connect with each other. I mean, I've talked about that with some friends, but we just never have done it. So I
let's
think
do
what
it.
you're saying is
We'll put one on. We'll put one on at the Aquilina.
I know we would
Miami
love it. I
sometime.
think that would be great. It's a perfect venue. But I agree with it's all about like creating these lists, writing it down. I mean, I think we all want these things, but then we don't action them and do it. So I think that's great. Well, this is wrapping it up. Thank you so much for sharing your message today with us. I found it highly valuable. It was very engaging. You should write a book. I think it's probably next, I'm sure, on your list. So we just wish you continued success. Thank you so much for joining AcquaTalks. And hopefully we'll have you on again in the future, and you'll tell us your next big thing. So
appreciate it, Alex. Thank you so much for having me. Thanks, everybody.
You're welcome. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you next month at another AcquaTalks or at the Estates at Aquilina. Thank you. Bye, everyone.